We are back with Nehemiah Gordon this week. He's going to go and take us back because this prophetic utterance that would be called forth in the last days, where the Gentiles and Israel will call upon the name of Yahweh, has been hidden in plain sight, but not in such plain sight that anyone can see, because the New Testament, Shaul's letters, Paul's letters say that the oracles of God, the communication of God, was committed to the Jews. And instead of the Gentiles trusting in and relying solely on translations and interpretations by Gentiles, 2,000 years and 8,000 miles and culturally completely removed from the land of Israel, having no idea what rabbinic Judaism of the first century that Yeshua was constantly interacting with, instead of going out completely to Gentile sources, Nehemiah is going to take us into these ancient sources. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't give you one-verse answers here at Root Awakening. We want to get into the background on these things, and so this is for those who really want to know the truth, those who have been given the gift of the love of the truth, because you can't get enough truth. If you're just into religion, you probably have already turned the channel. But if you want the truth will set you free. Nehemiah, please take us into the sources now.
So last week, Michael, we talked about how scholars, and serious scholars, I'm not talking about wackadoodles on Facebook, I'm talking about serious university scholars who are trying to understand how the name was pronounced, the name of the Father was pronounced in ancient times, will go to the depths of every pagan, magical, and Gnostic source, anybody but the Jews. And it's somewhat of a mystery of why they won't look at Jewish sources. And I started doing some study about this a few months back. I'd read a book in which this one scholar had said, a serious scholar, he said this name Yehovah is a distinctly Christian form, that no Jew ever thought the name was Yehovah, and it was simply the Christians misunderstanding what they saw in the Hebrew manuscripts. And it got me to ask a question I'd never asked before. And the question it forced me to ask, it made me ask, was, what do the rabbis say the name is? Because I'd only looked at the Bible, and I at that time had found the name in 5 Hebrew manuscripts, in a period, think about that, of 15 years or more.
Yeah, these are Bible manuscripts where all of the vowels appear, so it could be pronounced.
Right, it's the Aleppo Codex, the Leningrad Codex. I'd found it in 5 Hebrew manuscripts at the time. But I never even really asked the question, what do the rabbis say the name? And it is a good question. So I called my book Shattering the Conspiracy of Silence. And the idea behind that name is that we have an actual conspiracy that's described in the Babylonian Talmud, the Tractate of Kedushin 71a, and it's brought, we even have the name of the head conspirator. His name is Rabbi Bar Bar Chana. It's kind of a hard name to say. Rabbi Bar Bar Chana. And he lived around the year 250 to 300 AD. And he says as follows. He said, sages transmit the 4-letter name to their disciples once in a 7-year period. So what he's describing is, by the year 250, Jews were no longer commonly speaking the name. It had been forbidden by the Romans, and there was an internal reason to suppress people healing in the name. And it's really interesting. We talked last week how there were both Jews and probably also Jews who believed in Yeshua who were healing in the name of the Father, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and the rabbis wanted to suppress this, the Romans wanted to suppress this, so everybody was happy, right? But the rabbis still preserved this name, and they preserved it by transmitting it from rabbi to disciple once every 7 years. So that's a conspiracy of silence. We know, meaning we, the rabbis, know what the name is. We don't want the multitudes, and definitely not the Christians, to know, meaning that was really part of it. They were saying what they defined as Christians or Messianic Jews, Nazarenes, using this name, or as they saw maybe even abusing the name. We said, let's just ban it. And they said, well, ban it until when the Messiah comes. And they talk about how it's not permissible to speak it in this world, but in the world to come when the Messiah reigns as king, then we'll speak the name. But to preserve the name, they transmitted it rabbi to disciple once every 7 years. So
now in that, that was actually a ceremony.
So you're jumping ahead because I told you about this.
Oh,
Here, so
yeah, we're letting you.
Spoiler alert!
Yeah, we're letting you in on what we get to do for hours and hours and hours and hours.
Right.
You get a little bit of this, and so this is
right,
so
last
exciting.
night Michael got the 6-hour version. I'm going to give you the condensed version this time, guys. All right. So at the time I wrote the book Shattering the Conspiracy of Silence in 2012, I knew about this source. I didn't know about the other sources.
Okay.
And what I knew is that the rabbis in the Talmud in the year 250 AD are telling us they transmit the name every 7 years. But the reason scholars will plumb the depths of every pagan source for the pronunciation of the name is they don't believe what the Talmud says. They say, come on, the rabbis didn't really transmit the name once every 7 years. Surely if they did that, we'd find traces of it in later Jewish sources, right? Mm-hmm. And where are those traces? Meaning, we have over 100,000 Jewish books, and I mentioned to you I have a database with over 100,000 Jewish books. It came out of Bar-Ilan University. It costs about $1,000 with all the updates. And scholars at Bar-Ilan University have been typing in Jewish books since the 1970s. To the point where they've gotten to so many books, you can do a search, and you're not looking at all of Jewish literature, but you're looking at a large percentage of every Jewish book that's ever been written. It might be, and I don't know the number, but it's somewhere between 25 and 75% of all Jewish books ever written that have survived, let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. There's other books in manuscript that have never been printed. There's other books that, they'll eventually get to, right? Anyway, and I got to tell you a funny story about this. So I went to get an update. You got to get an update every few years on this database. And I went to get the update, and I paid the money for the update. It was a couple $100. And they say, okay, well, we have a guy in Jerusalem that you can get it from. You don't have to come all the way to Tel Aviv, where Bar-Ilan University is located. So I go to somebody's apartment in Jerusalem, and he's an ultra-Orthodox Jew, and he looks at me and he says, why do you want this database? This is 100,000 books written by rabbis. You're not wearing a kippah.